Hello and welcome back to Marine for TCG. My name is Joe. Drink of the day is milk. And now that we finally have the full set list for the Japanese OP15, we can take a look at that. And of course, with rotation in mind, work out what cards might be worth buying now to save a few pennies if you're planning on building the new leaders in OP15, or some older leaders that are getting buffed by either OP15, or again, those cards in the second half of EB04 that we're not getting until OP15. And starting off with the new leaders, for Krieg, I don't think there's much old stuff that he's worth playing. In the past, people had their eyes on the Arlong from EB02. I guess we can pull him up. Yeah, this guy. But now that we have the full set reveal, I don't think this really... I don't think this really has a perfect home within Krieg's game plan. All of the other Krieg cards seem to be about actively resting your opponent's board. So this Arlong, he's not got a great stat line. His effect's okay, but this worked quite well in decks like Kuro that wanted East Blue characters to rest. But Krieg doesn't particularly need this guy on the board. And with the amount of decent 4 to 5 costs that he has in the deck already, I'm not sure this is going to be necessary. Wouldn't be surprised to see this at like 1 or 2 copies in the decks. If you do really think that you disagree, and you think this is a great card for Krieg, you could pick up the Arlong. But I'm not super excited about this one anymore. Another one I have mixed opinions on is the Shanks. This card's very powerful. We've seen that in Mihawk, right? But the fact that Krieg doesn't have an inbuilt way to rest this immediately is quite the downside. Of course, you can rest it with, you can be the Samurai. That's not rotating. And you can also rest it with the counter events, or the main events from Mihawk. The ones that require you to rest a number of cards for their effects. Like the Strive to Surpass Me Roronoa Zoro event, the 4K. So we do actually have ways to rest this in your opponent's turn immediately. But they're a little bit more jumping through hoops than in Mihawk, of course. However, with how powerful this card is, especially when you stack this guy's effect with your leader's effect, I think it's probably worth just picking up your playset, especially while this is like 40p. In terms of Lucy, I have equally few cards to mention. Cavendish is definitely going to be a solid play in the deck. We have that 4-cost event, which is called, and no one else can have it. It's our memento of him. That lets you draw 2 trash 1 and then play a 4-cost. That's going to be really good with this Cavendish, in my opinion. Even with the new cards in the set, this is still one of the best Dressrosa 4-costs. Letting you draw 2 trash 1 every turn, and of course you get the draw 2 trash 1 off the event, and you're going to get draw 1 off your leader. So this seems like another really nice tool to further your hand advantage with Lucy. This is still quite cheap, but has been sort of steadily climbing over the last month, only by a few pennies, because of VV. This is quite a popular card in Red Blue VV, and I think it could be pretty good in Red Blue Lucy as well. And one other that I think could be pretty decent in Red Blue Lucy is OP15 Koala. Now this card is very, very cheap, 50p, and there's a PRB version of this as well, which might be even cheaper. There you are, yeah, 40p. What a steal. But if you do want any of the arts, there's still some pretty affordable arts. This one from the OP05 set. You can pick this up for as low as £5, pretty reasonable. And this is a really, really strong 2k, but it's never really seen a whole bunch of success because it's locked to Rev Army. And whilst Bello Betty did get pretty good use out of this, no other deck has really used this to its full potential, I think. And I'm pretty interested to see if it does end up seeing play in Lucy. Now for Blue Rebecca, it's a sad time. I just think that leader is awful. If there's something I'm missing, let me know, but that leader just seems rancid. Half the cards in the set for this archetype are in red or locked to Lucy. And the 3 costs are just really underwhelming. I'm not seeing what Rebecca's doing. That leader should be able to attack. I don't know what the hell they've cooked up with that one. It just seems terrible, and I have no cards to recommend. Cavendish, if you really like, it's a good card, but yeah, I'm not enthused by Rebecca at all. Now, a couple of cards that I think could be interesting to try out in Enel. Firstly, this Rosenante and Law. Again, we cap out at 6, so 6-8 is the biggest stat line you can play, other than those 6-8 Enels. And this acting as extra copies of those cards, whilst also drawing you 1 and being a blocker, seems pretty compelling. Not sure if it's going to be a mainstay in the deck, But just being extra copies of Enel, although this one can be removed, it must be said, seems quite interesting. And at just £1 or so, I think this price is fairly reasonable, although it must be noted this has gone up a little bit recently because of the success of Purple Yellow Rosy. And the other card that I think is interesting is the Reiju from OP12. Of course, historically, this has seen play in Sanji. Sanji's doing pretty well at the minute. He's, in fact, I think, one of the top decks in the EB03 format. However, this Reiju isn't always in the deck anymore, because he has other options. However, this isn't leader lock to Sanji. The condition is just having 4 or more events in the trash. And Sanji was really the only deck that was really doing that very fast. However, Enel looks like he's going to be playing at least sort of in the range of 16 events. Because so many of his 2Ks are events, similar to how Rayleigh was back in OP12. So I think there's definitely room to try out this Reiju in Enel. I mean, it's a 9-7 blocker. That's a pretty big stat line once you get the effect online. And with the amount of events that I think that deck is going to play, I think you can get this effect online probably pretty quickly. One thing to note with both this and the Rosian Law is a lot of the 2Ks in Enel say it's a 2K for one of your Enel cards. So it can defend your 6-cost Enels and it can defend your leader. But be careful, if you have too many of the 2Ks that only defend Enels, these cards will lose value because they'll become much easier to swing into if you do block with them. One more card that seems like a potential shoe-in for Enel is, of course, 6-cost Sanji. You're going to be behind on Dons once your opponent gets to 8 or more. Like, you stick at 6. What a surprise. So this is just a 3-6 blocker. I think one of the things that's going to be difficult about the Enel deck is every turn you want to drop a 6-cost Enel. At least that's what I'm envisioning. But on the turns where you do whiff, having this Sanji as a backup play, similarly to the Rosy and the Reiju, could be interesting. Is this worth playing over the events? I'm not sure. You're going to have to weigh up sort of the benefits of those events, both being events for the Reiju and the main effects of those, and compare, is it better? Is it worse than having this Sanji as an emergency play if you don't find one of your 6-cost Enels? Not sure whether this will make the cut or not, for sure, but it's no doubt very synergistic, and at like 50p a copy, you could buy plenty of these, I think, right now. Now, moving on to Green Black Brook, I have a number more things to mention, because the Green Straw Hat archetype is one that has already existed. It's not a brand new archetype, which is pretty exciting. So, firstly, I think you are going to want to playset this Nami. It's a little pricey at the minute, 7-day trending just over £2, but I see no world where the Straw Hat crew-focused green deck doesn't play a playset of this. Maybe I'll be wrong on that, but I think this is a safe bet that you will want a playset of these in Brook. So if you want to get ahead of the curve, these prices aren't amazing, £2 each, but it is what it is. These EB cards can sometimes get pretty pricey. Speaking of pretty pricey, this 4-cost Zoro is a 2K you can play in this deck. I don't think this is mandatory, for what it's worth. There are going to be other Straw Hat searchable 2Ks that you can play in its place. However, it is a very good effect. It's a blocker that you can just play in an emergency. Can't be rested by character effects like Usahachi or Hody, although it must be said there are more and more event-focused resting effects coming in. DMG is especially popular at the minute, so that is one thorn in the side of this card. If you do want to buy this card, I mean, £6 is pretty expensive in my opinion. But if you are looking to min-max your win rates with Brook, you may well want copies of these for the deck. However, I'm not sure I'm buying at this price personally. Moving on, Secret Luffy. Secret Luffy's had a bit of a spike over the past couple of months. I don't think this is particularly play rate, although it is pretty good in RG Luffy right now. But that was already a known entity. I think this has kind of been bought out a little bit but by the Poke Bros. But I'm not really sure why, because not all the other Secret Luffys have been. This is good in RG Luffy as well, don't get me wrong. So maybe this is just RG Luffy players buying this. But I think this seems pretty promising for Brook as well. Being able to dump this for 6 and then get 4 Don back is just very efficient. You can do something else like with those 4 Dons. Like play some Searchers or play Rebecca Blocker, who I'll come on to in a minute. And this having double attack, especially with the effects to restand that you have in Brook, could be pretty clutch to have a big restanding double attack later on in the game. This one is pretty expensive already at 13, but it's not the worst we've seen for a secret. Bon Clay was like £40 before he got a reprint. I don't think this is going to be as universal as Bon Clay, but this is a really nice effect. It's a Luffy card, and I think this could have potential at least at a couple copies in Brook. Now, Sanji, I think, is just one to pick up if you don't have your playset. Will this be good in Brook? I'm not sure. However, the effect is very good, right? It's a 3/7, and then every turn you will get one Don back at the end of your turn, which you can use for some of your counter events, which Brook does have a couple of one-cost counter events in his set, and you, of course, will be playing DMG. So, I think this Sanji has a bit of potential. It's worth nothing. Get some off your homies at locals. And same for this Zoro. I'm less confident in these two actually making the cut, but they're nice options to have. And when you're looking ahead to building a format, if you can pick up these cards for 2p off your friends, just grab your playsets. DMG is not 2p. There are a couple here for 10p, which is a bargain, but the 7-day trending on this is just under £2. I foresee this being important for Brook, as it is for every other green deck. And of course, this is Straw Hat Crew, so you can grab it off that one-cost army. Although notably not off the 2-cost chopper, because he only gets characters. And Brook being Slash, you could even maybe play a Slash package, but I somehow doubt that. But yeah, this card going for game, resting blockers, resting dons, you know how valuable that can be. I think you'll likely play this at least 2 copies in Brook. And if you don't have them now, I can only see this going up until we get a reprint in a potential PRB3. And finally, Rebecca. Rebecca is dirt cheap since her reprint in PRB02. I think this is going to have a lot of potential in Brook. Being able to grab back things like Pirate Docking will give you a really nice 4-Don play. You can bring that back if you milled it with your leader's effect. And you're going to mill a lot with your leader's effect. So having this as some kind of universal retrieval, whilst also being a blocker, and also being able to play out black characters, cheap ones, from your hand. You could maybe on 4 do a play like use your leader effect, play Rebecca, grab back your Pirate Docking for next turn, and then play out like a Chopper Searcher and mill 3, and then swap him out for something else. That's a play you could look to do. I think Rebecca seems to have a lot of potential in this deck, and whilst she is very cheap, I'd grab your copies now. And I know I said finally on the last slide, but now it's actually finally. I think this Sabo also is going to be pretty solid in this deck. It's just going to be live all the time, right? The problems we've had with this card in the past is getting that effect to where it's online. In Red Black Sabo, it just doesn't really come up. This is still a good card in that deck. You can resummon it with Dragon, but you're very rarely getting to play this for 3 in that deck. Same in Koala. However, in Brook, no, we're not Rev Army. No, you can't search this card. But you can grab it with Rebecca, of course, and you can also play it with Rebecca if you meet the condition, because he'll become a 3-cost, which is very, very powerful. Being able to establish a chump blocker and a 6k blocker, potentially as early as like your 3rd turn, seems quite compelling. And I would not be surprised to see this in the deck. At £4 for a PRBSR, it's not too bad. This is also universal. You can play this in any black deck pretty much. We've seen people try it in Emu in the past, although I didn't really see a great deal of success there. And I would not be surprised to see people playing at least a couple copies of this as like a really cool Rebecca target, as well as just a cheap blocker. One more card for Brook is potentially this green Nami. We've seen how good this is in RG Luffy, but also it's in play in GP Luffy. And like, yeah, you're not going to get a ton of value out of restanding 5 Dons, but it's just being a blocker that rests 2 of your opponent's 8 or lesses is crazy. You can deny some really annoying on-KOs if your opponent wants to block and activate an on-KO. You can rest more of your opponent's characters and then try and swing into them if you need to play board for a turn, perhaps. It just seems like a natural inclusion. Do note you can't grab it with the with the green 1-cost Nami because it's named Nami. It is what it is, but this seems like a nice little grab if you want to pick up a couple copies at £1 or so. Now, both the Black Chopper Searcher and also the Black Nami have, I think, breathed a little bit of life into Purple Black Luffy. They've certainly got people talking about him a little bit more. And if you do want to try that deck out, one card you're absolutely going to need is Beer Luffy. This buffing your leader to 7 has been one of the most staple plays this deck's ever had. And also now that it's unremovable, because you have that removal protection in both the 1-cost Nola and also the Zoro blocker in set, this card's going to be much more sticky. And even if it isn't, Well, you can resummon it with the ACOS Nami, which is pretty nice. I think this is one of the better targets that you can resummon with the ACOS Nami for sure. One of the biggest high rolls you can do with the ACOS Nami is you can play the ACOS Nami, bring back Luffy Taro, and then use Luffy Taro to summon Sanji Pudding. And both Luffy Taro and Sanji Pudding are sort of low enough that I think you should consider getting a couple copies of them now. Luffy Taro, I don't know if he's actually going to make the cut. It's a really good high roll, but it is a high roll, right? If you don't see this guy in your trash, and it's not like you can counter with him. Of course, you can zero cost him away. Of course, you might mill him with Chopper, but this is going to be less consistent to get this combo off. However, at £1, it's hardly expensive. Sanji Pudding is more expensive, but it also is more generically good in the deck. Getting you active Dons back is, of course, pretty useful. It makes your Don -2 effect actually into ramp effects when combined with leader effect. Sometimes it will draw a card, although not often in this leader because you typically ramp rather than sort of stay even or below. However, it's a great body. 5/7 is a really good stat line. You can bring it back off the Nami if you want, or you can bring it back off Luffy Taro as well, of course. And it could be worth buying a couple copies. Although at £6 or £7, I'm not sure if I'm buying personally right now. But it is one to consider. The PRBO2 Nami Searcher is also one to consider. I don't know whether you'll actually run this, right? Because there's so much competition in this deck now. You've got the new 2-cost Chopper, who I think is the best of the bunch. But you also have the 1-cost Law, and you have When You're at Sea, you can fight against Pirates, who are both much cheaper than this card. But this card does have a trigger, and it gets a bigger search, top 5, although it can't find Nami, so it can't find the big 8-cost Nami. So it's going to be a weird one. I'm not sure whether this card's actually going to be mandatory in the deck. But if you do want all the options, picking up a playset of these for £1 each, or even less, if you can find some of these 50p ones, I think it's probably worth it on balance. Another card that I think is worth definitely picking up at least 2 is the Closer Luffy. It's not seeing very much play at the minute. Very, very fringe play in GP. GP is not a top deck anymore, and this is not like a 3 or 4 of a deck. You're usually seeing this at around 2, at least from this that I've seen. But for just £5 for how good this card has been in the past, I think it's worth considering. One thing to note with this card, though, is as everyone sort of slowly becomes a 7k leader, this loses a lot of value. So when you're only swinging at 7, or maybe like 8 or 9 if you put a couple Dons on him, his closing power is much, much weaker than it is against 5k leaders. So that is something to note. And the last card that you could talk about for this Purple Black Luffy deck, I think, is this Black Robin. This Black Robin is cool. I think it's a bit of a weird target to bring back with Nami because you don't necessarily want to give it rush because it's a blocker. But it is still a 7k body. It's still getting a lot of pressure. You get a bunch of cards out your opponent's hand. It can swing for rush if you want it to. And also then it can also just be a blocker if you want it to. It's nice to have the options. And whilst this is literally 20p, I'll probably grab a couple of copies now. Finally, if you're a believer in BY Luffy, I have 2 cards to recommend. Firstly, this Ace, and the alt art's actually pretty cheap. Like £7. Pretty reasonable for this in my opinion. It's a nice alt art as well. But if you don't want to buy this, just buy yourself the rare version. If you don't have your playset of these, and you think you might be a BY Luffy player, I'd grab these now. These are pennies. We talked about the Zoro earlier, and the Zoro is £6 now. And the reason we're talking about BY Luffy, in case you hadn't realised, the Nami is pretty interesting in conjunction with that 7-cost Robin to buff up BY Luffy, just give him a bunch of lives, if that's what you need. And also the new 5-cost Luffy gives that deck a really powerful rush unit. And this Ace is one of the most important cards for the consistency of the deck. So I would recommend getting your playset of this Ace, at least the base rarity version, if you fancy yourself a bit of a BY Luffy player. And the other card for this deck that I would recommend getting now is Garp. This is less than £1. You can pick 4 of these up from this guy for 63p each. What a steal. We've seen some of these Starlight SRs get pretty crazy. The Boa, very recently, ST17 Boa blocker, reached £7. 4 Boa was revealed. That was like a £1 or £2 SR. Very similar to this Garp. Now, I don't think BY Luffy is going to be as good as Boa was in OP14, and is in OP14. But if you are a BY Luffy player, I'd recommend getting this Garp. It's very old and very out of print. And this is one of the most important cards from ST13 for the deck that didn't get a reprint in PRBO2. You could also look at picking up copies of both the Ace and the Luffy. The Luffy from the starter deck is the one that trashes lives. Now that we have that other 5-cost Luffy, you're probably not running the Egghead Luffy anymore. So you're probably running the new Secret Luffy and this Luffy. They seem like the best two to me, but let me know if you disagree. And this is the Ace from the deck. It's usually at about a 2 of alongside the PRBO2 Ace. This is the better one of the two. But having more rush units, I mean, imagine you play this and the Luffy. That's a lot of rush. Seems pretty good, and I think it's worth at least having 2 of these, in my opinion. Okay, moving on to Yellow Luffy. Firstly, I want to talk about this Kalgara. There are a number of other rare cards like Satori and Shura who could end up being worth playing in the deck, but I think they're very unlikely to rise in price. And to be honest, I also think this guy is unlikely to rise in price. He is a rare, he has a little bit of rarity, but nothing too crazy. This is just a nice card to potentially get you a bit of extra draw power. You can, of course, drop it off of the 7-cost Robin, which is great for a bit of board spam. Unfortunately, it doesn't exactly work like how you would hope it would, because you play the Robin and remove the life first before playing the Kalgara. But if you play this on 5, then you'll get his effect from your Robin, but taking and then healing a life. It's a really weird card. But yeah, I think the Kalgara could have a bit of potential, and if not in Yellow Luffy, it'll definitely have potential in Kalgara, who I think is also getting some nice buffs this set. Moving on to EB03 cards. Yeah, this Nami's expensive. It has come down a bit since release. I mean, as you can see, it's now down to around £20 in the EU. Cheapest UK is currently 25, although there aren't really too many at this price range. You're looking about 22 EU, where you start getting a big sort of accumulation of them. Now, I'm not sure how much more this is going to drop. With how short the print run of this set is, and how I think a lot of it is either going to be opened immediately, as it has been, or sort of hoarded and stuck under people's beds. Until we get that reprint later in this year, I'm not sure if this is going to go down much more. Could be wrong. I would love to be wrong. But for me, I'm buying my alts of some other cards from this set relatively soon. So if you do want these Namis, I don't think 20 quid is the worst. It's bad. It's the most expensive SR we've seen in a while. But it's not, like, insane. I was expecting between sort of £15 and £25 for these before the set came out, based on the price of Marco from PRBO2, and how much shorter a print this set seems to be, and how much more in demand this card is, because it is a game changer for a number of yellow decks. And I do think this is likely to be one of the best cards in the deck. You do have a number of other 5-costs you're competing with. That Kalgara that I spoke about, the Wiper SR from the set, and of course the 5-cost Secret Luffy from the set. So you do have a lot of competition in that 5-cost slot, and notably this one cannot be played off 7-cost Robin because it's not Sky Island. However, I think it's just still incredibly likely to be in the deck. It's such a good effect. Such a good effect. And the other EB03 card, and this one's still expensive, but not as expensive, is the Robin. I think this is also very likely to see play in the deck as your second 7-cost alongside the 7-cost Robin. Why does every Robin cost 7? Anyway, this also procs your Kalgara effect, which is pretty cool. Can get you a bit of card draw, similarly to how it works in Blue Yellow Army, and just gets heals and makes a body that's really hard to deal with. If you've seen this in any other yellow Straw Hat deck, you know how good this card can be, and I see no reason why it shouldn't be good in Yellow Luffy, especially as he makes even better use of his life cards, being able to take them to defend his characters. A couple of cheap cards next. If you haven't bought the Style decks, ST29, I would recommend at least getting a couple copies of the Kizaru unblockable event. Your leader is Monkey D. Luffy. It's a nice counter effect. Feel like we may as well try 1 or 2 copies of this, especially while it's pretty cheap, under £1. I would probably just recommend buying this deck because it's a good deck. There's some good stuff in it. But if you haven't bought the bricks for this deck, you could consider buying these. And I would also recommend buying a playset, the Robin. It's a trigger blocker that's a 2k. It seems pretty good to me. Will this actually make the cut? I don't know. There's quite a lot of good yellow 2ks between the Shandy and Warriors archetype, Sky Island archetype, and Straw Hat. But this Robin seems like one of the better ones to me, and I would want to have a playset as we look ahead if I was a Yellow Luffy player. And to be fair, of the decks that come out in this set, I think this is the one that I'm most looking forward to, other than maybe Brook. Final card for this deck that I want to highlight today is Enel. This has come down quite a lot in price over the last month. This was looking at like around £8 to £10. Now you can pick some up for as low as £6. I don't think this is going to be a 4-of in the deck, because it seems like you want to be more aggressive than stally. But having this as a couple of copies as just a nice little option seems pretty interesting. I want to try this in the deck. Don't know if it's going to make the cut, and I definitely don't think you'd need 4. But if you are a prospective Yellow Luffy player, I'd recommend grabbing at least 2 copies of this card personally. Now, with the release of the new 1-cost Hogback, and of course the new 4-cost Ores, maybe, but especially the Hogback, I'm really quite excited to revisit Black Moria again, because I think this deck has some legs in the OP14 format, but I also think it is quite easy to counter, and it's very reliant on your first life being a trigger from my experience. Definitely a deck that can compete already, but with those extra couple of cards, I think this could take him to the next level. The 1-drop Hogback especially is the exact card that I wanted this deck to get printed in the original OP14 set, because I really wanted to use the stage with it, because you can use the stage to bring back the Hogback every turn, mill a bunch of cards, draw a card. Seems pretty good to me. And with those extra mills, maybe you could even use the 4-cost Perona from whatever set it was, the one that bottom decks cards to buff one of your units. Probably not, but it's an interesting card nonetheless. So I think if you are a believer in that, or any other Thriller Bark package deck going into OP15, I'd grab 4 Morias. And this is when I can put my money where my mouth is, because I didn't have a playset of these, and now I do have a playset of these. Well, they're in the post, but yeah, I've bought 4 of these. I paid £4. So if you can get these for £3, you're getting a better deal than me. What a treat. I do think this card is already strong in Moria, of course, and in other Thriller Bark decks if you really want to play them. But with the new cards, I'm much more excited for this deck. And the other Moria, of course, the PRB02 Moria. I put out a post on X the other day. I was about to go and buy a playset of these. Looked in my binder. Already had a playset. What a genius. I think I got these. So I wanted to play Black Moria back when PRB02 came out. So if you want my live reactions to finding shit I didn't know I had, follow me on X, I guess. But yeah, I think it's at £4, which is what it sort of is at the minute. It's about £4 in the EU, £4.50. I think it's a good buy. This is a staple card in Black Moria. I don't see that changing. And especially with the PRB02 Perona, who I also want to talk about. And especially with the EB03 Perona, if I can speak properly. I think this is even more compelling as we look ahead now that we have a good target summon with the Perona. It's like on 6, you can play out this Moria, right? Summon the Perona. And if you have enough stuff in your trash, well then you can summon the Hogback. He mills another 5, and then you've got your KO target. KO him with your leader effect, and then you get to swing bigger with your leader, and then whatever else you had from your full on turn. Seems pretty cool. This Perona can be summoned by most of the triggers in the deck as well, and being able to give you and being able to summon this as a 4/6 blocker, and then also summon the Hogback alongside, seems pretty cool. And even if they KO the Hogback immediately, they're like, oh, I'm going to take away the leader effect. We still get the draw because it's non-KO. What a treat. And this Perona especially is very, very cheap at the minute. This is a brand new card out of EB03. Rip if you paid £8 for this, but this is currently £1 or less. If you believe in Black Moria, I'd get yourself at least 2 of these. But at these prices, I'd probably be tempted to just get a playset. And I actually have, in fact, bought a playset. Because I am a believer in this card in the deck. Finally, I don't normally talk about alt arts, but I do love a good leader. And if you don't have your alt art Moria leader, there's a couple here for around £15 to £20, that's a bargain in my opinion. If you do believe in this deck, I think this price, you're not going to get much better than this. Once people start looking at him for next set, if he does end up being playable, maybe he'll still be terrible. But if he does end up being good next set, I could see this price starting to rapidly increase. And I don't know about you, but I would rather get it now than get it later. Now, in terms of Kalgara, whilst I do think he's getting significant buffs, I don't think anything's that likely to rise in price. Just because most of his support, I mean, notoriously, he's not had an SR up to this point, which is crazy. We're finally getting the Wiper, which is cool. But yeah, the fact that this deck didn't get an SR in its set or in any of the follow-ups is wild. So as a result, I don't really have too many recommendations for you to buy now. However, if you do like alt arts, we do have this alt art of the vanilla Kalgara, who is probably still one of the better plays you can make in the deck. Playing a 6/8 for no cost is really good. And we also have the Kalgara alt art leader. He rose a little bit around Christmas, I think, but he's back down to around £20, especially if you're in the UK, it seems. The UK hates Kalgara. Look at all these. Look at all these Kalgara leaders. See, if you do believe in this deck, but you don't have the leader, grab it now. It's 20 quid. What a bargain. Now, that's all of it in terms of decks buffed by the OP15 cards themselves. However, in the West, we're getting half of EB04 in with OP15. So first, I want to talk about Koby. If you know me, you know I love Koby. It's one of my favourite decks to play when I'm playing sort of more off-meta. However, with the release of EB04, it looks like he might finally be, maybe not top meta, but very good at least. The new 6-cost Koby card is crazy, as well as a couple of other nice buffs in that set. But if you are planning on playing that deck and you do not have your EB03 Hibaris and Kujakus, both are incredibly cheap, 10p. What a bargain. Buy these now if you don't have them. And if you do want to look at the alts, these are also, they're sort of fairly reasonable. You're looking around 15 for the Hibari, and again, around 15 for the Kujaku. I don't think these prices are unfair. I'm very tempted to start picking mine up very soon, because I do want to have that deck altered, I think. I think it's very unlikely anything gets banned. It's really fun. If you haven't tried Koby, definitely try him out. And yeah, consider buying these EB03 cards, or just getting them off your homies, whilst the rare versions are so incredibly cheap. One more Kujaku that you're going to need for the deck is the SR from OP11. SRs, typically, when they spike, they only spike to a few pounds, but this is just absolutely nothing in a minute. You could probably get people at your locals to give these away, so if you do want to play Koby, I'd look to pick these up soon. And the alt art is also really nice on this one. I really like this one, and this has risen a few pounds within the last month or so. You're now looking at around a tenner for these. I've actually managed to pick up 5, which is incredible work. Counting is hard. I guess I have a spare one if the prices do rise. Another card that I think is a really good buy at the moment if you are looking to build Koby is Helmeppo. This card is sort of actually not that hot in the deck at the minute, because you don't have great targets. The 8-cost Koby is it's just not that great. And until we get the 6-cost Koby for you to be able to develop 2 guys on 6, and one of which is a draw engine, this card's not actually seeing that much play in Koby. Like, he's in some lists, but he's not in all lists. And as a result, he is dirt cheap. Like, the trending is 50p, but there are infinite of these for 10p. Even in the UK. What a treat. If you don't have these, I would recommend getting them. And the alt art is also pretty nice. And this one's still, you can still get this fairly affordably, around £7 or £8. So if you do want to bling the deck out, I would grab your Helmeppos sooner than later. One card that is seen play in not just Koby, but kind of a lot of red decks now, is Black Luffy. On release, this saw very, very little play because you saw the OP13 format. It was Ace and it was Emu, and power reduction did nothing into Emu, so there was a waste of time playing this card. And now this is seen play in Ace. I've seen this see play in Koby. I've seen this see play in all sorts of red decks, realistically. It's just a good card. It really is new age Otama, probably better than Otama on balance, but just brilliant nonetheless. Big fan of this Ace Luffy card, and fur your coat. And if you are planning on playing Koby, this is very staple in the deck. Power reduction is really good for that deck, because all our characters are still somewhat low power themselves. So being able to reduce your opponent's characters to power levels that you can battle more efficiently is really important. The alt art of this is quite expensive, because it's Ace, Sabo, and Luffy. So this got bought out a while back. It's now around £18. For me, this one's not worth it. I think we're getting a nicer print as well in the anniversary box, although that is a long way away. Finally, PRB02 Koby is a card I have mixed opinions on. This card's definitely good, but with the new Kujaku and Hibari, I think they definitely eat into his slots in the deck. I don't think I'll be playing this at 4 of in EB04. My gut sort of says 2 after very early testing, but I do think it is worth at least having a couple copies. The alt art of this one is really nice as well, but it is on the more expensive end at sort of £17 for a card that's sort of more of a 2 of than a 4 of, at least in my head. I would recommend getting at least a couple copies of the base rarity one, though, if you do want to play Koby. Now, you'll notice I've not mentioned Borsalino very much. Of course, you can't buy this now, because it's not out, but this card is proving to be a bit of a menace in Japan. The more we see Japanese results, the better and better this card seems to be. The fact that you can trigger this out with the effect of Ira Quasar help is insane. And I think more and more people are sort of looking towards this card potentially receiving a ban as we look ahead to the upcoming ban list. It's so free. It's absolutely so free. It's a blocker. You get a heal. No cost. This is just better Kuma. And Kuma was incredible for yellow decks. And this is just better Kuma. And speaking of Kuma, I'm going to pull him up on a different tab, because I actually think this is one that you should consider selling in a minute. I've sold mine. For clarity, I've sold mine a while ago. And I did say a while ago, I think this is going to drop. And it has already started dropping. Now down to 25 for the base rarity. As we look into EB04, not just that Borsalino, but the EB04 Kuma are both really good competition for this card. Yeah, this one. If you don't know what this does, there's a picture of it on your screen now for you to read. But as you can see, it is competition for this Kuma. Both this and the Borsalino, if he survives, I think this guy's play rate is going to drop so much. Because, like, yes, you have the on-KO, which is really strong. But the fact you have to trash a card to heal is so much fairer than Borsalino, right? And this guy's threshold being 2 lives is crazy. I think if this was a 1 life threshold, I could appreciate it a bit more, maybe. But 2 is crazy. I don't know if this card's going to survive. If it does, I don't foresee it surviving much longer after that. But we shall see. But yeah, just a small nod that I think Kuma is one that you could consider selling at the minute, if you haven't already. So that's going to be it for today. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any other recommendations for cards to buy, drop them in the comments. But these are just some of the ones I've been looking at, I've been thinking about buying, and that I would be buying if I didn't have them already. There will be another video in this style on the new wave of 6 starter decks, but those are so far out, and we've got so many reveals before then, it's kind of hard to look sort of 4 months into the future and say, yeah, buy this now, because it could be a waste of time, right? But the OP15 release is only sort of a month and a bit away, so I think it's worth thinking about it now. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.